Hello, and thank you for joining the McGill Executive Institute's Level Up webinar series. My name is Eric Sain, Executive Director of the Institute, and it's a pleasure to welcome you. This session is going to last about 1 hour and include time to answer your questions. Although you'll be on mute for the general session, we invite you to submit your questions by clicking on the chat button at the bottom of your screen. Also, for better viewing, we recommend that you turn off the video image of yourself by clicking on Stop Video to the left. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared with you after the session. We are very proud to welcome your webinar leader for today, Alex Boussetta. Alex is a faculty member of the McGill Executive Institute and a specialist in such areas as Lean and Six Sigma, Agile methodologies, and operational excellence. He holds a master's degree in engineering and project management. Pamela Sorrenti, our Director of Open Enrollment, will be your moderator for today's session. She specializes in developing impactful seminars and is a learning advisor for clients and organizations. Thank you all again for attending, and let's get started. Alex, over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Eric. So let's get going with today's webinar. And the first thing that we'd like to do is to go through a poll and asking you, what is the success rate in North America if we think about any project or task? Is it 10%? Is it 20%? Is it 30%? So as Pamela pops up the poll, I'll start to comment on the results, and we see the results populating at this point. So we see the questions are between 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60%. And we see the results that are coming on that your guest is quite right, actually. It's a tiny bit optimistic, but very close to reality. Around 30%, 40%. Reality is that the success rate is only 26%. And we'll show you a little more numbers in a few minutes from now. So what are the learning objectives from today? Well, first, would like to go through what agile management techniques can give us in terms of turbulent times, unstable times, and how they can help us to manage our reality a little bit better. We'll also learn how to prioritize customer needs. When times are confusing, we do get also confused in terms of what needs to be done. And people get confused, projects get confused, the business is also a little bit confused. So we'll discuss about this a little bit, how to help ourselves, as well as how do we monitor and validate progress in a way that we're either working virtually or working remotely, either with our teams, with our colleagues, with our employees, with our managers. And we'll as well share some tips and tricks in terms of what should we be doing in terms of virtual management and virtual meetings. Overall, in the agenda, so we'll start by discussing about the turbulence and complexity. We'll discuss about what is the difference between agile and traditional project management. What is really different about it? Priorities and how to prioritize. So how to manage those activities. And then we'll talk a little bit about how do we test and validate in that agile context. So being agile, we still need to validate with customers before going too fast. So this particular picture that you see here seems to be from another land. So actually it's very close. It's in Ottawa in 2018. And when we get any kind of a turbulent situation where we see a lot of unforeseen events, a lot of uncertainty, lots of things can go wrong in the way that we're trying to plan our schedules, try to plan our priorities, or what we should be delivering to our customers. Just to mention a few things over here. So people uncertainty, and that's a big thing, right? We are preoccupied. The business is preoccupied. So keeping a certain focus becomes quite a challenge. This focus challenge is due, of course, to business uncertainty and other components. But business uncertainty is a big reality. What will happen in 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? So personal concerns, business concerns, as well as the environment around us, what is happening. So this is a reality that we all see nowadays, presently in the COVID situation. But even if it was not the case, uncertainty is a reality of our businesses for every single day. And we also, on a continuous base, would like to take some risks. Taking a risk for a business can bring quite a few rewards, but we need to balance those risks and rewards, and we need to manage it in a way that is very flexible in order for that risk not to become too cumbersome. So let's discuss a little bit about agile versus traditional project management. If we look at a traditional project, or what we typically call waterfall, just an analogy to water. Water falls and it cannot go back up. So the same thing for a project. We get together, let's say on a Monday, we plan what we need to do. We brainstorm with our teams. We do some analysis, and then we plan the way forward for the next 5 days, 2 weeks, 2 months or more. And that becomes a very traditional task completion process or project, where we analyze, we design, we implement, we test, and then we release our services or new products. The agile mindset is typically quite different. And I'll take a very, very basic example to explain what it is. A donut. A donut, very basic, but could be very, very complex and very risky, like any type of business. If I took a donut and wanted to, right from the bat, decide right away if I should put some peanut butter, sparkles, red pepper on my donut, I might be right or I might be wrong. And I could spend a lot of time developing my product and not achieving something that the customer really wants. The idea of agile is that I will start with a minimum viable product. The basic donut, and making sure that the basic donut is something that is tasty, that is okay and satisfactory for customers. And then I would go through validation loops with the customers. Then I can decide within a day or within a few hours to change from one recipe, going from chocolate to maple to raspberry jam or anything else. And this is being agile. So going in steps and making sure I address the customer needs timely. What are some examples of companies that are using that agile mindset? Very, very typical ones are Google and Amazon. And I've been working quite a bit with one of Amazon's distribution centers. There are so many tests that they would do from week to week to understand how customers' behaviors change, what customers want best. If you just look at the web interface from Amazon, you would see, if you pay attention, that the icons and colors change places on a daily basis. They change things around to see what are the customers' preferences, to explore new ways of ordering, new menus, new features. Same thing for Google. If you look at Google, Azure, and different web-based Google products. Agile is not only for web development or software. An example that you see on that slide is General Electric Aviation, which is using the Agile techniques on the development of aircraft engines. I'd like to finish by commenting on what is happening right now with the COVID-19 situation in terms of all the small businesses. And small businesses, some small, some larger businesses, all turning around and producing masks, producing ventilators, and trying to achieve such goals within a few days, within 1 week, within 2 weeks. We're talking about very small businesses in Canada. We're talking about Dyson that is doing vacuum cleaners, that is now doing ventilators. We're talking about Tesla. We're talking about General Motors that are doing those projects and developing those products in an agile manner to be able to convey to the difficult situation that we all go through. So let's go back a little bit to numbers and compare really traditional project managements, waterfall versus agile. In this study that you see on the screen, the study was done for projects, and projects can be months to years, as well as tasks. And in this study, it includes tasks that were even 2 or 3 days long. So if we compare those numbers, the success rate of waterfall is 26%. Agile is 42%. So Agile is not a silver bullet as per se, but is much better. Is much better because of that adaptation, of that flexible approach. And you see it goes from 26% to 42%, does not go to 100%. It is not only the method that makes a difference, the experience of the team, the experience with the customers, with the market also make a huge difference in terms of the success rate. And you see as well that the failure rate as well is very different. So 21% for traditional projects and 8% more for agile projects and tasks. At this point, let's go through some questions before going further in our webinar.
Hi, Alex. Okay, so yeah, we do have a few questions. I'll start with this first one. Alex, I was wondering if you had any specific experience applying agility to business processes outside of product development. I'm thinking of HR processes or running a squad within a specific business process, such as supply and demand planning.
Absolutely, and some very interesting examples. I've been working with one particular division of Amazon, and if we look at trying to adapt to what customers want. And this needs a lot of agility. Some customers want things within a few hours or within a few days. In some other regions in Canada, people are much more environmental conscious. So saying, please do not send me my book one at a time. Send me a package of 3 or 4 books at a time. So this needs a lot of adaptability in terms of what needs to be done. In terms of HR, I just would like to mention another example. I've been working with the Keurig and Dr. Pepper organization, and lots of people in lots of retail organizations have variable compensation plans, meaning you do not get an overall wage week per week, but it depends on your performance, it depends on sales, depends on objectives that change quite a bit. So what Keurig and Dr. Pepper done was a series of plans or tests to try to see what models fits best the business, as well as employee satisfaction. So trying to do the test of the different compensation plans one at a time, a few requirements at a time, then to end up with the final solution. But instead of having a final solution after 12 months, we had bits and pieces of a good solution after just a few weeks. And that's one of the ideas of Agile.
Perfect, thanks, Alex. Another question, from an innovation perspective, isn't failure also a positive thing?
It is actually, that's a very, very good point. Failures are, I would say, a learning tool. But I would like to distinguish between what we call a failure and what we call try-storming. We typically refer to brainstorming, and instead of failure, it's more try-storming. So I'm going to try things out, and things did not work as well as we planned. So we did not completely dissatisfy a customer, but we had some comments from the customers in terms of doing things better. So absolutely, this is something that needs to be looked at.
Great. So we'll have time for one more question, and then we'll come back at the end with to address some of the other questions that have come in. But one more, can you please provide examples in services in healthcare, for example, nursing, where you can apply Agile?
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting one, and one actually that I'll comment on. And if you're curious, it is on the Montreal Children's Hospital website. In 2014, so we're talking here about quite a while ago, we started to do a few projects. Budgets were $0. The entire staff moved to that New Glen hospital. We could not, and people did not really know what to do. And at that time, if you look at the average waiting time in a hospital in Montreal, the average waiting time before being seen by anyone was around 8 hours. Children was around that 8 hours as well. What the nurses did, and actually we coached the nurses in order to do this, is how can I improve my emergency department step by step? So step one, what they discussed was, well, let's try to have less people waiting in the examination rooms, but once we see a patient, we take care of that patient and we get that patient out as efficient as possible. So that was step one. And step one did reduce by about 1 or 2 hours. Step two, they looked at where do they store all the lab tests. The lab tests, actually, they were in a system. So what kind of a flag can we add to the lab test? Then we had additional improvements based on that one. Step three said, oh, now that we have all those triggers and signals, let's move a little bit around what is our layout, our physical layout of our emergency. And they did a first change. They tried it out. It worked very well. They did another change a few weeks after. At the end of the day, they went from an overall 8 hours to 90 minutes. But that was not done as a traditional project. Let's start a project and let's get 90 minutes after 8 months. No, after a few weeks, we started to see already some improvements. And so it is the idea of Agile, of if you prefer continuous improvement. And yes, there were lots of trials, not full failures, but still things that worked or that did not work that well. All right.
Thanks, Alex.
So let's continue with some of the other elements from today and discussing about priorities. And this is something that is really key when we think about having an agile approach, really understanding what needs to be the first steps, what are the first things that we need to do for customers instead of trying to do everything at once. In terms of understanding the customer needs, I'd like to introduce the idea of what we call a user story. So instead of having requirements that are fully documented as we shall provide this to a customer, etc., it's more to think in terms of action verbs. In terms of verbs, what do customers like to do? And this is what we call a user story. If some of you have taken any value engineering or value analysis classes, same principles applies, which is what we call functional requirements or functions. So what is a user story? It is the story of what a user or customer wants to do. As an example here, I'm taking a personal example. Myself, working from home, needing to stay at home, I needed to go through some physiotherapy. So the high level user story here, what I needed as a customer is, as a patient, I can go through my physiotherapy treatment from home. So this is actually the first step. I could then subdivide that user story into several elements that I can then develop as a solution as we go, one at a time. So as a patient, I can book my appointments online, which is already a first step. As a patient, I can hear and see my physiotherapist giving me advices. So going through solutions like webcams, etc., being able to get some advice. So these elements could be done as a first shot. Then a few weeks later, if I was in the physiotherapy business, I can then think about the next user stories. As a physiotherapist, I can share exercises and guidelines online. I can track the progress. So the idea here is that once I identify my verbs, my actions, my user stories, I will then decide which ones I would tackle when. With the user stories, a tool that we'd like to introduce, and we will send you a template about that one, the Kano model. And the Kano model is about prioritizing what needs to be done. And we'll do a little exercise on that one. Some of the needs or user stories from customers are what we call must-be's. A must-be, as an example, from home, I'd like to have access to essential products: soap, shampoo, water. And these are musts. If I do not give you the essential products, if you look at the scale of dissatisfaction, it goes down. I am not satisfied. And if I give you your essential products, you're not going to be excited. It's something that you expected to have. So having essential products or being able to order fresh fruits and veggies. I want something that's gonna last a few days or 1 week or 2 weeks once I order from online from my grocery. This is a must. We have then what we call satisfiers. And satisfiers is the more, the better, or the less, the better. So there is a certain proportion. Being cheap, I'm ordering food online. The cheaper it is, the better it is. I'd like to buy some Scott's towel toilet paper. The cheaper it is, the better it is. But there is a certain proportion. Same thing as delivering. Will I get my merchandise quickly or not? So this is a more of a proportional thing. So in terms of priorities, I will start with the musts and then go to the satisfiers. The last one is what we call delighters. The delighters is actually the cherry on top of the sundae. That is a nice to have, which is nice, but which is not essential, such as receiving a call right before a delivery, or I'm ordered my grocery and I'm getting a free chocolate bar. It's nice to have a chocolate bar, but it is a nice to have. It's not something that I'm going to focus on more if I was at IGA or Metro and I needed to develop a solution. So let's go through an exercise. And that exercise, I will let Pamela explain a little bit how we will do it through breakout rooms. But we're going to give you a few minutes, so 7 minutes, and then we're going to put you in small teams. Small teams, and we're asking you to identify 3 to 4 user stories. So 3, 4 needs related to what you need in terms of yourselves, being residents, staying at home and working from home. What are the things that you might need? And once you identify those 3 or 4, classify them using the Kano model. Which one are the musts, satisfiers, and the nice to haves, the delighters? So Pamela, if you'd like to go forward.
Yep. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the process. So we're going to assign you a breakout room. You'll get a little pop-up that says enter breakout room. It takes a few seconds just to connect. Once you're in the breakout room, do use your video and unmute yourself so that you can communicate with your group members. First things first, identify one person in the group who's going to write down your responses and your classifiers. And so like Alex said, you're going to have about 7 minutes. We'll call you back to the session and it'll automatically close the breakout room. You'll get a 60-second notice. And once you return, if you wouldn't mind having that one person, that dedicated person, just enter the results in the chat room. I'm also posting the breakout room process as well as the project guidelines in the chat. So with that, good luck, everyone.
All right, see you in a few minutes.
Yeah.
All right. Also, make sure, make sure also to share some of your ideas, sorry, in the chat.
Well, why don't I start reading some of them out as people return? We have Vladimir Romero and his group. They came up with must-be's: computer or laptop, internet connection, headset, quiet space. Satisfiers could be video conferencing, training on using collaboration technologies, groceries delivered to your door. Oh, sorry about that. Good VPN connection, business services from home, Purolator and printing. Delighters are prepared food delivered, dedicated home office, work-life balance training, staying fit physically and mentally. So another group, must-haves, proper equipment. Another one, as a worker, I need to have access to the internet. That's a must-have. As a worker, I need to have space adapted to my needs, a satisfier. And Karen Arsenault says, as a home worker, we will need a computer. That's a must-have for sure. From room 30, we have work-life balance is a must-have. Personal support, normal outside setup appointments is a delighter. Tools and techniques to keep yourself focused are must-haves. Proper home office setup, must-haves. Flexibility, maybe not traditional work hours, a must-have. Let's go over just one or two more. A satisfier would be a minimum satisfying internet connection. First, the must-be would be technology, computer, internet, having a collaborative platform. And a delighter would be comfortable office space in the home. The coffee be delivered. That's a nice one. So I think a must-have, another must-have would be get medication within a certain time period. A satisfier would be getting it on time, and a delighter would be getting notifications along the way. So I think, Alex, that's quite a few examples there if you want to.
Yeah, fantastic. Actually, that's very, very. I'm happy that people were able to go through that exercise and share a few ideas here. Just put here, and you'll get the slides. I just shared a few more ideas here, but your ideas I find are much better than the ones that I've put here. So she will go to the next steps. So you see the exercise that you've done is not only identifying requirements or customer needs in terms of user stories, but as well, the way you done it sets a certain priority level in what needs to be done first. What we'd like to also discuss a bit is how to manage those types of activities, or once we decide what we need to do first, what we need to do seconds, and what we do step by step. And one thing that is very, very key and important is to go through visual management. And this is just an example here, a tool called Trello, but there's so many different tools that are that are designed in order to do this. And this is just an extract or something that I built with one of my collaborators. So if you look at the column doing, we know exactly what we're working on, what Alex is doing, what Nicholas is doing, the due dates. We know what is the to do, what is next to do, what is on hold. Triage, so the other user stories or other requirements or tasks and projects that will need to come over after. So managing visually is something that is very important to understand what is at stake, what needs to be done now, but what is coming up later. So then just in one view, within 60 seconds, we know what is going on. Trello is one tool. Jira is another one, Smart Sheets, Monday, many of those. And if you see the example of Smart Sheets, it's not only about tasks. You can put files, you can put pictures. Microsoft Teams, also if you have Teams, does about similar types of visual management. And of course, all of these, it's very nice technology, but technology is not absolutely a must. If we were much more face-to-face or we had a webcam, just little cards or post-its could achieve the same purpose. One thing that is very important when we drive any type of, I would say, agile activities, or we need to speak with our colleagues, team members, employees, our managers on a frequent basis. So what is suggested is really to build what is called a virtual table. So if we've got, as in this example, 7 people are on a phone call, I would build a virtual table. You see here John, Mina, Luz, Jay, and building that virtual table, I know who's on the call, and I can make sure to engage people. So I would do some round tables that sometimes we call daily scrums. And around those round tables, asking people, what are the updates? What are the news? Webcams are great to do this, of course, because you don't only listen, but you see the visual expressions, you can see the nonverbal language. One thing that I'd like really to focus on this particular slide is when we discuss, and especially if yourselves, you are project coordinators, your supervisors, managers, directors, VPs, team leads, make sure that when you discuss with people, especially in those unstable situations like we live right now, assign the what, asking people what they need to do so people understand what they need to do, what tasks, what project, not the how. We tend to micromanage people, especially when we're not used to talking with people over phone lines. We're asking them over and over, how are you going to do this? Are you sure you know how to do this? Can you please describe how you're going to do it? This can be quite annoying because instead of giving overall empowerment of what people need to do and what people, and leaving people the luxury to think about how they're going to do things, we tend to be a little bit too directive. So managing the what, not the how. And if people need to people need help, people need coaching, they would come back to you. The typical daily meeting, or if it's a weekly meeting, goes through 3 basic questions. What did you do yesterday or last week? What will you do today? And is there anything in your way? Not how are you going to do it? It's much more about, is there something that I can help you with? Tell me. Otherwise, just get on with it, making sure that people understand that they have ownership of their tasks. Any questions on these particular aspects?
So, hi, Alex. I do have a few questions. So how do we rate if a project has succeeded or failed?
That's an interesting one, and we're going to cover a little bit, actually at the end of this presentation, we'll discuss a bit about validation, but it's really the customer feedback. The customer feedback in terms of not only having a score to 1 to 10, and some of you might be familiar with the Net Promoter Score, which is on a score of 0 to 10 or 1 to 10, how likely would you recommend our services or products to a close friend or a colleague? Those are fantastic to judge a certain sentiment, but having words is something that is very essential in terms of getting that feedback. So you start with a score, but getting the words to complement what is being done is key.
So that qualitative data.
Yeah.
So how do you work on waterfall and agile projects that are utilizing the same resources, or use agile methodologies when your team is not necessarily dedicated to just those types of projects?
Yeah, and actually it's interesting because there's a lot of literature about agile. Actually, there is Scrum certification at the Executive Institute about agile, so it's a 2-day certification. And if you read books, they're telling you you need to be either 100% agile or 100% Scrum. I do not know any company that is doing this. Actually, the idea here is, if I go back to this example here in terms of visual management, on the same visual manager, I would put my waterfall projects and my Scrum activities, my agile activities. So I know what are my priorities. I know what I need to do. And let's say here there's a guy called Alex. I will make sure that Alex does not have 12 tasks. Alex might have 2 projects what are waterfall and might have another 2 or 3 or 4 that are agile. But I have a limited number that I need to complete before going to the next ones.
Perfect, thanks. So just one more before, you have a few more things to cover. So I'll just, I've worked with different organizations, large to SMEs, and there is an endless attempt to apply agile methodologies. In which situations or environments does agile not work?
Honestly, and I have not seen any environment where it did not work. The problem where I see that where it did not work is when the promoters, the advocates of Agile are coming with a do or don't approach. We need to do everything 100% Agile, otherwise it's not worth trying it out. As an example, Canadian Marconi, which is called CMC Electronics today, are aviation electronics. They're building cockpits. And in the aerospace industry, it is almost everything is waterfall because of certifications, etc., Federal Aviation Agency. And we started one agile project, one agile to see how it would go. We explained to people how we would do it. And people understood that we're not stopping to do everything else. And it worked quite well. So I think it works in any environment as long as the team understands that it's not an all or nothing kind of a thing. We're doing everything waterfall, that's fine. Waterfall is good. Let's start to try to do a few things agile.
Great, thanks.
So the last point, testing and validation. So something that is very important, and actually we tend to think that in order to try out a website, software solution, an app, a product, a delivery, we need to have the full solution developed. And if you look at this picture over here, this is actually what we call a mock-up. It is a mock-up, meaning it's a prototype. It's a prototype of what the final solution can look like. So I'm designing an app, I can show that prototype to my customers to get a feedback, a quick and dirty feedback in terms of how would you like if we developed something a little bit more refined, of course, and sexy than this overall prototype, and getting your ideas. What we tend to use as well is storyboards. And you see here, this is one from TurboTax. So looking at what I could do about receipts, entering receipts in a TurboTax online. So I'm describing a story based on user stories to customers saying, is this interface, would you like to have something like this? Yes, no? Please give me your comments. Please share. Please throw rocks, throw stones at those storyboards. And then from these, we're going to build the full solution. So something that I'd like to do for 5 minutes here, another virtual exercise. We'll do brainstorming again in small teams in the breakout rooms. And I'd like you to think about the virtual Olympics. So we all know that the Tokyo Olympics are delayed, so at least by 1 year. So I'm asking you to think about how would you build a mock-up or a prototype? How would you show on a piece of paper with drawings the idea about a new Olympic sport, a new Olympic game that you could perform online? So you could take just 5 minutes. You can draw, you can type your ideas in the chat, and I'll show you some examples of drawings that you could do within 2 or 3 minutes, then after that. So Pamela is going to invite you back in the chat.
Sorry, so Alex, you want to do the chat or the breakouts?
Let's do the, you know what, because it's 11:50, let's do a chat.
Yeah, I think that's best.
A very good idea, yeah. If you could share some of your ideas in the chat and we'll go through those.
Perfect.
So ideas of Olympic Games or sports, and what kind of a prototype of mock-up you would show to people on a piece of paper.
We'll just give everyone a second. Oh, got one coming in, an online chess competition, esports, e-gaming, so virtual sports, played video games, already a huge deal. Send in videos of performance. Peloton cycle train racing, it's a good one. Zoom spelling bee. Cycling has moved to virtual platforms, yep. A lot of the online spinning, so Peloton's really doing a good marketing job. Video challenges and send in. Poker, diving, send in video. Yeah. Virtual golf, Scrabble tournaments online, beatboxing, I like that. Gymnastics, car racing on video, Wii Sports, virtual rowing, computer bridge, events held without audiences. So a Fitbit marathon, yeah. Jeopardy, card games. Different ones here. Holographic trainers. I love that. Good one, Carol. Using sports tech to measure performance remotely, but live cast so people can watch at home. Right. Self-timed races and line dancing with your family competition. I like it. Speed grocery shopping. I think we're all getting good at that. And one more, plank competitions.
Excellent, excellent, yeah. No, thanks a lot. Those are great ideas. And when you think about it, most of those ideas would really work if we really wanted to do a virtual competition. Just here to extend, if we had, let's say, a 5-10 minutes, we could then go through a mock-up or a prototype like this one. And this was inspired about things that actually people did send me in another occasion. And you see here, it's competition about jumping. So you jump in front of a webcam, you start at 30 centimeters, and then you increase until you reach a certain maximum. And when you look at it, it's a very simple drawing that was done virtually online, could be done just by a mouse or a stylus, and a symbol for a webcam to show that it's a webcam. Another one here, it's a typing speed challenge. So those are just, person who did that just took some symbols from Microsoft PowerPoint. Symbol from a laptop, from a chronometer. So I have a time constraint. There's a voice dictation, and then the contest is about the typing speed. So so the idea here is, instead of just sharing, sorry for this, instead of just sharing the ideas verbally or typing a few words, you can show a picture, and then people would be able to comment even more because there is a certain picture or a certain principle of what is being done. So just to conclude, we want to give you a heads up in terms of really helping you today and giving you a few takeaways for you to go back with certain tools in terms of how you can manage a little bit better virtual situations where you have tasks, you have projects to conduct, and people might be a little bit confused what to do first, how to identify, how to prioritize. And we wanted to share still some tips and tricks and get you a little bit involved on this webinar through some exercises. I'd like to end up and asking you if you have any questions about what we covered today.
Great. So we have a few minutes for some questions here. I have one. How do you work Agile into a specific deadline? So how would you decide if it's a success or a failure? In a crisis moment like now, what's the right moment to use or implement an Agile model?
It's interesting because it's even more helpful when you're in a crisis mode, because let's say you know that you need to accomplish something within 5 days. 5 days, and then we're saying, okay, let's start. We're going to try to do all our requirements, all what our users want, all what customers want within those 5 days. Then after 3 days, we realize, oh, we only accomplished, we can only do what are our must-haves. We could inject a few satisfiers. We don't have time for delighters. So it even helps more in terms of managing tight deadlines. But that's one of the reasons why Agile was so much used first in web development, software development, app development, because those are those situations. People have that iPhone, that Samsung, that LG, and they want the app today, not tomorrow. So what can we develop today? So it's quite helpful in those situations.
Thanks, Alex. Okay, so how does design thinking and Agile overlap? Is it a true statement that Agile is the delivery method for ideas from design thinking?
Actually, that's an excellent question, because the Agile and design thinking have the same history. They were both developed in Japan in the 1980s. And design thinking got more into, well, getting from an innovation idea, going through the commercialization of the idea. And the overall Agile is much more how you manage the project or the task around it. What kind of tools do you use? They're very close. They're complementary. And if you ever took design thinking courses or Agile, you see that there's about a 60% similarity.
Great. Okay, so one last question before we close out. How do you prioritize in a cross-functional key stakeholders environment that all have different priorities?
Yeah, that goes a little bit, that's an interesting one, because you can use the Kano, the Kano in terms of the must-haves, etc. But typically what you're trying to do as well is you're trying to do some voting. And it sounds very, very basic voting, but works very well. Works with senior executives, works with teams that are not at all senior executives. Voting, and then you discuss about the high votes and the low votes. So instead of discussing freely, you vote first, and then you complement by discussing and then agreeing, which then takes half an hour, 1 hour, instead of taking a full day.
Okay. Okay, so that's all the time we have for questions today. So I want to thank everyone who joined in to make this session a success. And I also want to thank Alex, our great and very informative leader. I think a lot of people getting a lot of good feedback on the chat, and people are walking away with some good ideas. So within the next 24 hours, you'll be receiving an email from us with a recording, as well as the takeaway tools that Alex discussed, and a feedback survey. It would be really appreciated if you guys could just take a few minutes to fill that survey out. It helps us to refine our process as well as the experience. So thank you again for attending this session in our Level Up webinar series. We'd love to stay connected, and if you have any questions at all that were not answered, feel free to send them to me in an email and we'll reach back out to you. Definitely connect with us on LinkedIn or Facebook. And our next session, just for your information, will be on Wednesday with Nathaniel Hames, who will be speaking on engaging customers from behind the screens. So it'll be a really interesting one. Have a great day, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend and stay safe.
All right, bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Bye.